Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and have a great guest today, Anthony Parenti, and he's got a fabulous website, ItaliansReUs.com. So, welcome, Anthony. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Before we talk about the website and how people could utilize it, just a little bit about your background. Where's the family from, and where did you grow up?
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where I still reside. My family came over in the 50s. My mom came over originally with her brother and her mother. They came from Spino Saturnia, which is in the Latina region of Lazio. And my father came over afterwards because he was still serving in the military because everyone in Italy, once you reach a certain age, you had to serve in the military. So once that was over, he came and joined my mother in East Liberty area, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, so your family's relatively new then.
Yes, and he was from Crena, Azonia, which is in the Frosinone region or province in Lazio. It's relatively close to where my mother was from, so they were not that far from each other.
Oh, wow. So now, that's not unlike my uncle's family because they came in the 50s, also because when my grandparents came over, they left him behind. So with that, did they speak Italian at home, or did they just go right into English?
They did speak Italian, yes. More so around my brother and sister. I was the youngest of three, and by that time they had moved out of East Liberty and moved to a neighboring borough. And they did speak Italian. And they always yell at me because the only part of Italian I learned was all the bad words. So I used to get out of it. If I said a bad word and my mom would yell at me, I'm like, hey, you wanted me to speak Italian, so I'm speaking it.
Well, my parents, they both spoke Italian because their parents spoke Italian, but when they didn't want us to know something, they were talking Italian.
Exactly. So you knew they were talking about you when they switched from English to Italian. Like, all right, what do we do?
Uh, and when they were really bad, when my mother was really mad, she would call me by my full name, Robert James. Um, so why did they come? Was their family here, or it was obviously to work? But
Most of my mom's family came over to Pittsburgh, or relatives, cousins, and all that, and that's where they ended up in Pittsburgh. My dad was actually the youngest of 11 children, brothers and sisters, and he was the only one that came over. So all the remaining of his family basically still in Italy.
oh, so you have a lot of family left in Italy. That's
Yes,
wonderful. Now, have you been back?
I did go once in 1984, so it was a long time ago. I was a young teenager, and I look back on that experience, and I didn't appreciate it as much because of how young I was. Now, I still enjoyed it because I got to meet my aunts and uncles and cousins and all that, and had a fun time with them. But looking back, I would wish I was a little bit older and I could appreciate and all the things that happened.
Well, you're definitely younger than me, so there's time to go back. I mean, we just went for the first time after 25 years, and it was just so marvelous. I didn't want to come home. I just
It
wanted to
is
stay.
beautiful.
And there's so much to see and so much to do, and the food and everything, and all of that.
You can't, no matter how many times you go back, you can't see it all
No,
or
no,
do
no.
everything you want to do. It's just that's what makes it great.
But yeah, but it is a great experience, and I mentioned this on a couple of the podcasts since I'm back. Is I didn't know that my father had first cousins there, and we got to meet them. They were in their 90s, two of them, and they were just. It's hard to, you can't explain it. You just can't explain it. Now, have any of them come here?
My one aunt did right after the birth of my oldest son. So she had the opportunity to come over and actually get to meet my oldest son and hold him and play with him and all that. So that was a great experience because unfortunately she has now since passed. So she never got the opportunity to meet my second son. But my one cousin also came over, but he came for a business trip to Washington D.C. So we got to travel down there and meet with him for a little bit. But other than that, aunts and uncles, those were the only ones that came over
Yeah,
to
and
visit.
I just recently found that through the cousins that I know over there, that I actually have two cousins in San Diego that I never knew about. I mean, I just recently found that out. So that's why I tell people you never know what you're going to find. You dig, these things pop up. So was there? So going back to your dad's family and your mom's family in Italy, were they? Did they have any kind of particular trades, or were they like a lot of us, just farmers? I shouldn't say just farmers, but farmers.
They lived in, I guess, remote village, not remote village, but remote areas where what they did was farming. When my dad came over, he started his own landscaping business, and he maintained that until he passed away in the '80s. So he passed away a long time ago. And but pretty much they worked their farm, their land, and I know some of the cousins and all that were able to go on and get their degrees and work in other areas, other professions.
Yeah, well, that seems to be what happens. So let's talk about the website. It's Italians Are Us. I love the name.
Thank you.
And why'd you do it? Why'd you start the website?
Well, actually I started back in 1997, writing about stuff about Italy and Italian culture. It was for a company at the time called Mining Company. They basically was a giant group that had what they called guides for like 1,000 different topics, and then they were looking for somebody to do the topic on Italy and Italian culture. So I said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do some writing. It was right after my oldest son was born, so I said, well, let's do this for a little bit. And after 9/11, for some reason, the company decided to get rid of a lot of people. And I was like, I have been doing this for about 4 years now. I have a lot of material. I said, let me look into creating my own website. And I was looking for various names. A lot of things were, already taken. So I said, you know what, let's do Italians Are Us. So I started that back in what was that, 2001, and I've been doing it ever since.
Oh wow! So you've been doing it for a long time. Yeah,
Yes.
I started it. I guess it's about 4 years now, and it was really just to kind of get my stuff out there, and then I found it was just one way. So I said, well, let me do a podcast. Let me see if I could actually do a podcast. And so now I get to talk to interesting people like you who have the sites and could help people, and uh, authors I've talked to, and really has given me some great insight and some hearing some really interesting stories. So what would people find if they go to Italians R Us? What are they going to find there?
Oh, they're going to find pretty much a little bit about everything. We do have extensive surname collection, so people can add their names to it. And I have had people contact me afterwards saying, "Hey, thank you because I've actually met a distant cousin just by saying the same last name, same region, same town that they were from." So they were able to contact them and find out that they were actually related. You'll find articles on pretty much different traditions, different folk tales, legends, articles on just the various architectural buildings, paintings, pretty much whatever I can find. I try to get on my website, and a lot of the articles are things I write. I also have some people contribute articles, so if anyone has a great story they want to contribute, they can come to my website and get in contact with me, and we can get that added because that's the one great thing. There are so many different traditions and stories out there that would be great for people to be able to read and just to hear about. So if anyone would like to do that, they can come to my website as well. Um, we have all kinds of resources for people. So it's pretty much, it doesn't focus on one specific area, but it covers the entire broad reach of Italy and Italian culture.
Yeah, right. And that was one of the first things that I keyed on was surname collection. But for people listening, there's surname collection and recipes and photo galleries and proverbs and memories and all kinds of things. And I'll have to send you, a couple of stories myself, I think, to put out there.
Uh,
Um,
Definitely, thank you.
and so what things do people seem to key off on the most, when they go through the website? Is it the photos or the folklore or
A little bit about everything. A lot of the personal stories and stuff like that that people have written get a lot of attention. A lot of people are looking at real estate. I know I'll have a lot of things on there for moving to Italy and how to buy property and stuff like that. That's another area that people look into. A lot of people are looking into just things on Italian men and women. Different things about them, and a little bit of everything gets utilized and people go and look at. So there's something for everybody.
yeah, and and that's exactly what I noticed out there. Um, I find the same thing. That some of the stories are so interesting. Is there anything that any one or two that come to mind that people have told you that kind of like, wow, that's really something.
Like I said, just the people who've contacted me saying they finally met, long lost relatives that they never knew they had. So that's always great to hear from people who were able to go to my website and be able to connect with somebody else or find someone that they never knew was a relative that wasn't living that far from them. So that's always great to hear when anyone just contacts you and say, "Hey, thank you for your website." You know, I didn't like. I have a bunch of things on Italian American baseball players and football players, and a lot of people just contact me and go, "Wow, I never knew that person was Italian. Where did you come up with these list of players?" And thankfully, a lot of people would reach out to me and say, "Hey, you know what? This person is Italian. Did you know this person was?" And then I would go and do some research on them and realize, hey, they do have Italian blood in them, and then I'll get them added to the website. So it's just great talking back and forth with people.
Yeah, and to that point, I just got a really interesting story that I didn't know. Somebody, I've done maybe 10 on Little Italy's around the country, and in fact, it was my daughter's boyfriend who hit me up on Facebook and says, "Hey, can you do the Hill in St. Louis?" And I was like, "Okay, never heard of the Hill in St. Louis, had no idea." Uh, and that's where Yogi Berra lived.
Yes.
And so I did the whole story about Yogi and Joe Garagiola, and I was like, I knew they were from St. Louis, but I never knew about the Hill. So to your point. Sometimes you get these things from the strangest places, and all of a sudden set you down a whole nother path. Like one of the ones that I did was on Giovanni Martino, who was with the Seventh Cavalry with Custer. Interesting story that I had never heard about, and you start connecting the dots with these people, and it's really really something. And for people listening, you know, he was actually John Martin in America, and he was one of the well, he didn't actually survive the attack. He actually wasn't there because he was sent on another mission to go find somebody. But really, really cool story. So with the photos that people send you, do they send you a lot of family photos? Because I know I get a lot of hits on that kind of stuff.
uh, some do, but when with my photo collection, I try to focus it just on the architecture and the beauty of Italy without the personal personalization of people in it, because you have issues with copyright and all that. So with my photo collection, I strictly try to just keep it on photos of the different places of Italy without as many people in it as possible.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I'll have to send you some of the ones that my daughter took. My daughter took 2,000 pictures while we were there.
Nothing wrong with that. It's always great to go back and look at them. I mean, when I went back, we didn't have the ability with these smartphones and anything like that. So you have to go and develop the film or whatever, and go find a photo book and go back and look at them. So every once in a while I do, because it was a fun experience going back and visiting some of the areas there.
Yeah, that's what I have. I have I mean, I don't know how many I took. Maybe I took, you know, 3 or 4 rolls of film when we were there 25 years ago, and now she's walking around snapping everything that she can and putting filters on it. She had the iPhone 13, and she's taking these pictures. They look like artwork when you take a
Yeah.
picture with that thing. It's
So,
unbelievable.
this technology is great. And another great thing about the technology is I can, talk to my relatives over there relatively easy now
Yeah,
with Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. And where you couldn't do that in the past, you had to use the old landline phone to contact them, and you had to wait till a certain day of the week because it was cheaper to call them during that
that's
time.
right.
And where nowadays just go on the internet and you can chat away with them for as long as you want.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that my cousin sent me after we came back was he went through his mother's artifacts and everything, and he found back in the 20s, not the 2020s, the 1920s, uh, they would send a postcard with a picture
Yes.
and have the handwriting in the back. So he actually found postcards that my grandmother sent to her father in 1919 with her handwriting on the back. So
That's
when
great.
you come across something like that, I mean that's gold,
It is.
to go along with the stories. To know that these people were in contact with each other, and one of the amazing things about it was uh, you could tell from one of the things that she wrote that she knew that she was never going to see her father again. So from when you find something like that, when I found that, it was like a blessing, but it was also very sad.
It
You
is.
know what
Yeah.
I mean? You know, because like you said, they couldn't converse on TV like we are right now.
Definitely
So,
different how they had to do things back then. And you sit there and go, could we survive back then?
no, and what was really amazing about it? Um, we went to towns that I knew that my great grandparents and great great parents they were in Naples, but I knew that they would go back to these towns in Calabria and Molise, and it was a 5 hour drive from Naples by car.
Yeah.
So you're on these roads and you're thinking to yourself, how long did it take these people to get from one place to another place? And that's probably why people didn't leave their towns. You couldn't go anyplace anyway if you wanted
It took
to.
too long. It wasn't.
Exactly.
You either had
Exactly.
to walk or go on either donkey or a horse or some type of way to get you there. But cars were scarce, so it wasn't, and you couldn't afford them if there are any. So it wasn't easy.
So now that brings up an interesting point. Now your parents came in the 50s. Did they come on a ship? Did they come by plane? How did they come?
I believe they came by ship. There was one part I really didn't delve into with my mom and dad, and I wish I did, was more of the journey that they came over. I know there was a lot into it because originally my mother's father went to Argentina, but because we have family in Argentina as well. I have family all over the world. I have Australia, Argentina, Canada. They're everywhere. But originally he went to Argentina, but unfortunately he was killed there. And I guess that kind of changed the path of my grandmother deciding to stay in Pittsburgh when they came over. Because if everything went as planned, I'd probably be in Argentina right now.
No, I was going to say. So he was. They were in the States, and he was thinking about relocating to Argentina.
I think he originally went to Argentina
Oh,
to
okay.
find a place for them to, because we had family that was already in Argentina
Yeah.
on my mom's side. So he originally went there. And then unfortunately, like I said, he was killed. So that kind of changed where my grandmother wanted to go because we also had a lot of her cousins and came to Pittsburgh. So she decided to go that route instead.
Yeah. Well, sure, sure. That makes sense. Where you're going to go where the family is, but that's interesting. And a lot of people don't realize how many Italians are in South America, went to South America and Argentina and Paraguay and places like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a big contingent that went They either went to Argentina, a lot went to Australia, and
Yep.
then a lot came to America.
Yeah, and I did an interesting interview with the guys who uh, wrote a book about the Italians in the 1870s that were told that they were going to go to South America, and they dumped them off in New York and just left them there. And they had to, they had to figure out their way, and a lot of them wound up going into Pennsylvania and working the railroads um, and things like that. Um,
Yeah, they did a lot of the work that other people didn't want to do. You know.
exactly. Well, like I guess, like most immigrants, you pick up what you have to do, and some of them were skilled, but a
Yes,
lot of them aren't. Uh, my mother's family, they're from Bari, and they, for some reason, and I still can't figure out why. I'm trying to get in touch with somebody who wrote a book to explain it, but for some reason, the Baris in New York all became ice delivery men,
it may
and
have
nobody
just been one
nobody knows
person was in
why.
that, and then they were able to get them in there, and they kind of just were able to go about it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, and I did see a short video on it, and these guys, they used to carry 150 and 300-pound blocks of ice
Yep,
on their back up, a New York City tenement. Strong, strong guys. Uh, and I remember some of my uncles were old enough to probably work in that business in probably the 30s and 40s, and they weren't big men, but they were built. They were muscular type of guys. You know,
I'm sure.
um, but it's like you said, it's interesting to catch those stories and everything. Um, so I guess growing up, I guess did you eat mostly Italian food? I always ask that question because food is that's our thing.
Yes, my mom did all the cooking, so there would be a heavy staple of Italian recipes within there. Every once in a while, she would stray away, but for the most part, we had you know pretty much Italian recipes. She would make her own sausage, Italian sausage.
Oh, nice.
She would
Yeah.
do a lot. We have when we moved out of East Liberty, because that was within the city of Pittsburgh, so you didn't have a big area to do any garden or anything like that. So when they moved, they were able to purchase an area that had pretty good land. So my mom had this pretty extensive garden. She would grow potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, zucchinis, and then whenever she could, she would can, obviously. So tomatoes, they would have a huge process where like a day or two where they would just cook the tomatoes and do everything they need to do to make their own tomato sauce, and then they would can it. And closer to the fall time, actually about right now, my dad would go foraging in the forest, and he would look for mushrooms and things he would call sponges, and
Hmm.
he would dig them out, bring them home. I always found it funny because my mom would cook them, and I always sit there, well, how do you know they're not poisonous?
They know.
Yeah, well, my mom would throw a quarter in the water, and if the quarter stayed clean, it wasn't poisonous. If the
Really?
quarter came out all dirty, it was poisonous. You couldn't eat it. So
No
it's just
kidding.
little things like that. You're like, how would they know even back in Italy when they did this stuff that things they're eating weren't poisonous, but they were able to find ways, simple things that you and I would not even. You think in a quarter, well, how can a quarter tell you that it's? But I guess the silver or whatever is in the makeup of the quarter, the poison just attracts to it.
I guess maybe the silver or something that does something and interacts with the
Yeah,
silver
so
somehow or
little
something
things
like
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had, if we also did the American holidays, like Thanksgiving, but there was also always an Italian twist to it. You
Right.
always had like a lasagna or a ravioli of some sort to go with your turkey. So there was always a little twist to it.
Yeah, and I remember my uncle he used to go pick dandelions out of the park.
I'll tell you a story of that because my mom used to do that as well.
Really?
And my mom would make, she called it cipollone. And it's basically like a dandelion pie almost.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I do have a recipe for that on my website. So I grew up on that. So, I would go to school. My mom would make me lunch or whatever, and my lunch would be like a dandelion sandwich, and of course, you're with people who are not Italian, and they have no idea what you're eating, and they're like, "You're eating dandelions?" I was like, "Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. It tastes really good."
Well, I always say we used to go to the beach and we used to go with uh, eggplant parmesan and sausage and peppers, and you look on the blanket next door and they're eating bologna sandwiches, peanut butter
Yep.
and jelly. But one of the guys in Boston, um, in the north end of Boston, the woman used to cook Italian food in grammar school because there was a big Italian thing, and he said we used to eat Italian food in grammar school in the lunch thing. I was like, oh my god, that must have been so great.
I know,
Must have
really.
been amazing. uh, because I guess the woman was Italian, and that she knew she made
That's what
what
she
she knew
knew.
how to
So
make. So, but I
she's
love
probably
the
like, I'd rather have them have something good to eat than some of the things that schools end up feeding. I'm not saying it's bad, but growing up,
no,
would you
it's
rather have homemade Italian food or homemade
exactly.
any food pretty much than some of the things you have to get at the cafeteria?
No, exactly. And I love the fact that your mom used to make her own sausage. I used to know somebody in Chicago. Her dad, um, he may still even be alive, but um, we went to her place one time, and she said, "How do you like the sausage?" I said, "I'd never tasted sausage like that." She said, "Oh, my he's 86. He's still making it, and he used to make it for pizzeria. Still 86 years old, he was still making the sausage for this place, and it was
Yeah, I used to help
truly
my mom
amazing."
make it, which I got the job of putting the meat into the grinder, and the meat was, your hand was frozen because the meat was so
That's
cold
right.
when
Yeah,
they
you
put
have
it
to.
in. And we did a lot. My dad used to make his own wine, so he made his own homemade wine, and he also did that because whenever Christmas came, all of his customers would get his own homemade wine as a
Oh,
thank you
nice.
for,
Yeah, yeah.
and my mom would make she'd make homemade Zeppelas, and she would include them in there. So that was their way of thanking people you know, for their business. So we used to do a lot of the homemade wine, and like I said, the sauce, the canning peppers.
Yeah. See, I vaguely remember the winemaking because it stopped when my grandfather, you know, not when he died, but probably just before. So I was, maybe 5 or 6 years old. So I vaguely remember that. I mean, my uncle used to make, the homemade raviolis and things like that. That was always good. But I do it occasionally. I marvel. Sometimes I'm in the kitchen here with the air conditioner going, with the big stove, and frying eggplant or something like that. And I think back to my aunts in the small little kitchen with four burners with no air conditioning
I
for
know.
hours, for hours.
I understand that. You sit there and you're like, how can they survive? Just the heat,
Yeah,
but it didn't bother them. I guess they were just used to it, and or they just didn't complain about it. So this is what we got to do, and we'll do
right.
it.
And somehow they found room in the refrigerator for everything. I can't find room for anything, and I get this big giant refrigerator.
They knew how to do it.
Uh, and it was always, but I grew up watching my aunts cook. That's why I like to cook. I think I used to like to watch them and, um, you know, sneak in there with the bread in the gravy, or steal a meatball before it was, you know, just as it was coming out of the frying pan.
Everybody needs a taste tester, so you got to taste it.
That's right.
That's our jobs.
That's right. And it was always a fight over which aunt made the best meatballs. We used to go through that all
And
the
you
time.
had to be careful what you said because you don't want to make one ant mad over the other. So you got to watch what you said.
Uh, and yeah, it's so sad that a lot of those things, those traditions are gone. Even the American traditions. But I'll tell you one of the things that I learned when we went just recently. I didn't notice it that much when we went the first time, um, but I noticed it now that, especially with the food, uh, that Italian American food is quite different from Italian food,
Yes.
and even the way they eat it. the way the courses come out and things like that. Um, and I said to somebody, I said, um, growing up, if somebody asked you, "What are you?" you would say Italian American. Um, or you'd say, actually, when I was real young, you would say Italian. And then you would say Italian American. And then when you go to Italy, you realize you're neither one of those. You're actually, you're an American when you're in Italy.
they it's different, and it's with every cuisine. Once it comes to here, you go, whether it's even Chinese, or you do Polish or whatever cuisine it is. There's an American spin to it that if you went to that actual country and order that same thing, you'd be like, this is not what I'm used to. You know, it's just how it is. We always, I guess, have to put our own flair on things.
Uh, yeah, and that's it's funny you mentioned that. I was in Hong Kong one time, and I ordered Szechuan pork, and I was thinking I was going to get the typical Szechuan pork that you get here with Fuji, and it was like I guess it was almost like sliced in like bacon, hung over a rack, and I was like, "This is different," and it was so hot, so hot. If you go to a, not to digress, but if you go to a Szechuan restaurant over there, everything comes in a big giant bowl of chilies. Everything, big giant bowl of chilies, and that's just the way they do it. Um, well, this has been great talking to you, Anthony. I really appreciate you taking the time. Just so everybody knows, what's the website again?
It is ItaliansReUs.com. So
And yeah, I urge everybody to go out there visit because, as Anthony said earlier, there's something out there for everybody. Whether it's recipes, whether it's photos, proverbs, memories, and as Anthony said, you're invited to submit articles. So that's really special too.
I also, if you don't mind, I do have a section where I've created T-shirts for every region. So if someone would like to personalize those T-shirts, you can contact me, and I can put in your family name. I can put in the specific town your family came from, and anything you would like me to add to it.
Oh, okay, that's great. Yep, that's really good to know. All right, well, thanks again, Anthony. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.